is in my state, I'll be taking this time to talk a little bit about what I do for my day job, which is teaching voice. Um, so today's episode is going to be a live stream revolving around. Let me get my chat up here. Revolving around range, specifically your full voice, how to increase your full range, what the registers do, some stuff like that called basics. Now, I have to really make a clear point that these kinds of episodes are not really to replace vocal lessons. They are really good supplementary stuff. I can say that when I learned how to sing, I spent about a grand total of 6 years with 2 coaches to build this stuff. So it definitely takes a lot of time, mainly because when you're learning what registers you're singing in, it's very good to have a second opinion, to have someone who knows what to listen for as you're building resonance, as you're developing your full range. Because there's a lot of ways you can confuse yourself. I did. This was one of the reasons I got lessons. When I got into voice, the big thing I wanted to learn was how to sing like high rock stuff. Like one of the biggest influences for me was Paul Stanley. I just really loved the power in his high end, just the explosiveness whenever he kind of cut loose. So how do we do this stuff? Well, first I want to break down the different registers of the voice so we can be on the same page. If I were to say, like what chest voice is, what head voice is, all that stuff. So let's talk about that. So the vocal cords work kind of like the gears of a car. You may hear this from time to time talking to a coach. For instance, right now, the voice I'm currently in is my chest voice. Chest voice is the easiest voice to be in. The vocal cords are in a state of compression. Now, unfortunately, that term can be confused with a bunch of other things, but when I talk about compression, it's a function of the vocal cords. Sorry, I woke up not too long ago. Getting a little bit of weird reflux, so you might hear me kind of clogged up here and there. But, so let's talk about how the chords work, what makes a chest voice. So, when the chords are together, if you really want to see how the vocal cords work, especially when you're singing, there's a really interesting video where Steve Tyler has his vocal cords filmed, and he does a little bit of vocalizing inside them. So, if you look down in your vocal cords, you're going to see, like, these cords are kind of facing upwards at you. So, if you're looking down my throat, like, with a lens right now, you're going to see, like, them together and kind of vibrating, kind of releasing. When they're close together, that's going to be a state of compression. And what's happening is the cords releasing air and vibrating are creating this full sound you're hearing. It's kind of like a garden hose, for instance. Now, now how that works is, if you ever think of how a garden hose works, releasing water out, when you turn the faucet on and there's no compression on the hose, the water's just going to kind of pour out rather weakly. So you're not really going to get a lot of oomph out of the water, the stream. So how do we fix that? Well, that's how compression comes in. So for instance, if you're looking at the nozzle and you're putting a little bit of compression on the hose, just a little bit, the water starts jetting forward out, just flying out, especially if it's aimed correctly, which is something we'll be talking about in a little bit. But this is crucial, and this is the current main state our voice is in. You don't find a lot of guys that talk in a state of decompression. If you do, it's not something they can do for very long because it is a drying effect on the voice. So, the next register. This one's rather pretty easy to use. Most guys, girls typically use this one, and this is where we start getting a little bit of confusion with the terms. So this one is called falsetto. Now, in terms of classical, a lot of our people like calling female falsetto head voice. But for all intents and purposes, we're going to be calling both the same thing, because there's a term for head voice that's used in contemporary that, if used in the classical sense, will cause a lot of confusion. So falsetto, those vocal cords, these guys right here, they unzip, and air is now just flowing out rather weakly. The edges of those vocal cords are vibrating very quickly, very lightly, and that's where you're getting that light, kind of weak tone in your falsetto. Not a lot of efforts really put into the register to make that sound. However, when it comes to falsetto, it gives you a lot of range, but there is a drawback, which is the lack of thanks Tess the Devil. Barry Gibb, yeah, it's interesting. When they were working on the first few releases of the Bee Gees, he actually was singing in full voice, but then they told him to try falsetto. And in the 1970s, falsetto was very popular in pop music, and it still is to this day. But there was almost like this little like falsetto renaissance in the late 70s. You had the guys like Michael McDonald running around, obviously the Bee Gees, and a lot of other ones. I mean, a lot of early Michael Jackson was heavy in falsetto. So there's a place for it. There definitely is. But it's the problem that comes with range is a lot of people tend to require falsetto for their high end, where it's not necessarily the register that might be appropriate for a song. So here's where the next one comes into play, and this is the one that I spent the most time really studying and really working towards, and this is called head voice. So head voice, the chords are now back in a state of compression, and you have that power again. However, you're resonating, or you're vibrating your voice up to the front, and this is why it's called head voice, because you're vibrating into the front of your face. You're resonating into the front of the face. And what makes head voice so interesting is it has relatively the same range of falsetto, but it has power to it. It has a presence to it. And this can really make the difference between a lot of famous vocal lines. For instance, since we're talking about pop music at this point, if you were to sing Thriller in falsetto, it wouldn't really sound that good. But if you were to do full voice, which is the way that Michael initially performed it, you'll hear that power there. So excuse me for the mucus here, but if you hear, for instance, I'll make a demonstration. So if I'm singing a note, I do like Thriller and falsetto, in the thrill of night, like that's falsetto. Not a lot of power to it. Sounds kind of goofy from guys. But if you were to do the full voice version of it, something more lines of the thrill of night, I hear that power to it, that oomph going on. So how do we find that? Well, couple tricks, a couple ways we can do that. One, we first have to make sure we learn how to resonate. We have to learn how we hum, where we vibrate when we sing. There's a couple ways to do that, but one of the best consonants you can vibrate on is usually going to be on a closed N. So for instance, if you keep teeth together, you can make kind of this sound, like you can hear at the end there, I was able to rev up the sound a bit more and get a little more power behind my voice. This is one of the two volume knobs of your voice. The ability to resonate can really manipulate a lot of your voice and keep it relaxed and very fluid. So resonating is something that can take a long time to master. Because for me, it's spent weeks just being able to not just resonate, but to do it comfortably and fluidly. To be able to not you're not trying to like push as hard as you can. You're like I could feel like a little bit on my neck there, and that's not the end game. Your goal here is to be able to just hum in the front of your face and keep it relatively, depending on the part of the voice, around right here. That's where I feel a lot of my resonance when I sing a lot of my mid notes, and a lot of my highs too. But typically the highest stuff you're doing, like the super high notes, and at least in head voice, you're gonna probably feel it right behind the front of your skull. And I know when I'm having a good day vocally, I can feel that it's almost like a pocket of air right behind here, and it's like just gently trying to squeeze out. It's almost like a therapeutic feeling. It's very interesting. When I was first told to expect that, I was so surprised. I was like, what? What are we talking about? But the more you do it, the more that it starts to make sense. So the resonance stuff. There's a lot of other ways you can resonate. I know with opera, there's a lot of upwards resonance. They like to resonate to the top part of the roof of their mouth. And it works for certain sounds. But when it comes to that really high, powerful head voice stuff, not really. It's kind of I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong way to resonate, but there are ways to do it that are more appropriate. For instance, I don't think you'd want to hear Pavarotti singing Thriller anytime soon, or any like high pop rock song, and I don't think I'd want to hear Michael Jackson doing Nessun Dorma. It doesn't. Just styles of resonance and different technical things that make both work well, and some that don't work well. So the next register we have, there's two other registers I haven't talked about. We have your these ones are kind of your outliers. You're not going to be using these too much, depending on what you're singing. The next one's called vocal fry. Now, vocal fry is interesting because it can color a lot of your other registers. You can use this to add some stuff to your voice. I got an update there. Hey guys, thanks a lot, man. So that being said, vocal fry. So vocal fry relies on these little things above your vocal cords called your false folds, and the false folds can be vibrated to add a lot to what you're doing. Now, for instance, if I want to sing a note, okay, I got one. So you can use these to add like a grit to a vocal line, and I'll demonstrate one. So I'm going to sing a line here that uses a lot of my mid, kind of mid or lower-esque head voice here. And I'm going to first sing it without vocal fry. Then I'm going to sing it with vocal fry. So mixing these techniques together, you can really get a more inspired performance out of your voice. So for instance, if I'm vibrating those little false folds, I can make this kind of a sound. Well, this is without first. So here's a line. It's like, that girl can't take her. Don't you know that she's a heartbreaker? So there's no vocal fry there, right? No like grit to it. But let me go try a little bit of fry now. And it's, so we're doing head voice. I'm doing fry. So here's what that sounds like. That girl can't take her. Don't you know that she's a heartbreaker? You can hear like a little bit of that there, a little grit. So the fry, that's the first thing that fry is used for. A lot of us tend to use fry when we're talking. I do. Probably a little too much. It's probably I get dry sometimes. But also fry can be used to extend your voice very low. I've had a few basses over the years I've worked with, and one or two of them insisted I sing with them, and my voice is not naturally designed to go down to like really get down to like those low notes, and you can hear that little frog sound in my voice as I'm going down. Like it's not really resonant, but it can be used to kind of augment your high end, your low end as you're going down. The next one, this one is a tricky register. Some people it's a bit easier for them to do it than other people. I know for guys it's quite hard. It's called whistle register. Now, for instance, whistle register, that's primarily reserved for effectively Mariah Carey high notes. Those little bird notes here a lot. That's whistle range. That it's a variant of falsetto essentially, and it can be modified with enough control to give you a little bit of extra range in case you need it. So yes, then we're going to go into something else too. I kind of take a little bit of issue with sometimes whenever I work with a vocalist who's had, it depends on what instruction they've had before, but sometimes I hear this comment, which is like, oh, my range just can do this, basically is a way to say, oh, I can't push my range any further, or I can't open my range is a better term, open my range even further. And I think that could get a little bit concerning, because naturally, a lot of the high stuff that I typically do, my tessitura, or my natural comfort zone, which is what that means, I'm not supposed to do it. But with perseverance, I was able to. And it's not because I have some, amazing inherent, skill. It's just because I kept at it. I kept working on it. I kept tinkering with it. So, for instance, I would not classify myself, if I was considered a tenor, I wouldn't be a high one. There's just elements of my voice that don't lend themselves to being a high tenor. I like to use a lot of my mid to high range, but typically if I would classify myself as something, I'd probably be like maybe a higher baritone. And so what that means is there's a lot of notes that I like to play around in, specifically in the fifth octave, these guys, that I should not be able to technically hit. But understanding resonance, understanding breath support, understanding tension, good vocal health, aside from today, it allows me to get up to those notes. And I tried not to obsess about my classification, or if I had one. I know back in high school I was classified as several things. I was a baritone for about a few months. Then I got moved to tenor 2, which is the low tenor, and then I got tenor 1. Does that mean I'm all three of those things? No. It just means that you could do those. So whenever someone says that, this is just my range, this is just what I can do or what I can't do, there's a reason my old recordings were not released. There's a lot of stuff from 2005 that they've been justifiably destroyed. There's just stuff I couldn't do back then that I could do after working on it. So whenever you hear things like that, it does get a little bit frustrating, because what that means is people are effectively selling themselves short. And then that spreads. Then that spreads to other people who are looking into getting in a voice, and they think, oh, I can't sing. Material that I thought initially I could sing because everyone else has these very defined limits, which is just it's not necessarily true. I mean, there are natural inclinations people can have with their voice. Sure, I think that a natural low bass is most certainly going to have trouble ascending up to probably the mid fourth octave and above. But I guess my point is, don't set a ceiling that's unnecessary. Don't put a limiter on your voice that shouldn't be there. I think the greatest vocalists, I've had the pleasure of working with or talking shop with, they're always very curious, and I think that applies to any talent you have. Is the more curious you are, the more you're going to be able to open up your own potential. And as I proceed forward here, let me go on my Periscope real quick so I can share this on my Twitter. I unfortunately with Restream I can't stream all this at once. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Yeah, King of 84. I believe that note is in. What's that? Yeah. So what we're doing is. But full voice. And I just don't feel like doing it right now. But yeah. So that note. Fun fact on that one. That is an F5 up to a flat 5. Not a fun note to hit. But in the note, in that song, it sounded appropriate, and yeah, that's a fun one. The slides, it makes that one tricky. A lot of times in the studio, I like doing things that sound really cool, and then live, it's like, all right, Rob, you really got to be patient and relax. But yeah, that song's I could break down that one. There's a lot of fun technique behind King of 84. There's a lot of notes in that tune that are in an area. And there's a fancy term for this. It's called your Passaggio, or your break. For me, a lot of King of 84 is around my break, and it just sounds good there, so that's the way I sing it. Here you go, Periscope. Okay, let me share this real quick, guys, and then I'll get back to going on about range. But yeah, dude, like, the idea that, Bradley, here we go. Share this on Twitter. Okay. All right, live stream. I'm gonna go share this on Recall while I'm on it too. Yeah, might as well do that too. I know I got a lot of dudes in that group that like to talk about voice. Okay, so Recall. Doing a live stream about. Okay, so, anyways, yeah, so let's talk about the different areas where it's hardest to sing. I would say the most annoying area to sing of any, if you had to pick one, is going to be the Passaggio. And the reason why the Passaggio is hard is you have to make a lot of quick decisions when you're in there. For instance, if you're in your high end and you know how your high end feels, like if I were to do, I might be able to hit that A5 right now. Yeah, it's like, so like that's the peak, right? Whatever, I got it high enough. But yeah, so in order to get notes that high, I know where it's gonna be, like right about there, to go up that high. And with the Passaggio, however, when you're in your break, it's like you're stuck in. It's like you have to reach the top of your first gear when you're driving, like you're just flooring it, right? And you have a choice. You can stay in the top of your chest voice. So, for instance, I'll pick a Passaggio note here. So that's a good break note for me. So if I were to sing in my chest voice, I could pull the chest voice up and make a note like this. You hear that kind of opera-y kind of sound going on there. Or I could use my head voice and switch early and go down. So the same note in head voice would sound like this. Ah! So you can hear that there's distinct different tonal qualities going on. But what I'm doing is I'm shifting into the next register ahead of time, so I don't find myself burning out on the first gear. Instead, I'm in the second gear early. But even with that one, it's very easy to build up tension, specifically around the neck, especially in a lot of these pop, rock, like higher end contemporary things. So then that goes into a whole other topic, which we can get into later, which is tension control. How do we control tension as we're flying up our range and doing all these acrobatic things with our voice? And that can be a long-term struggle. Even a lot of coaches I work with, we talk about tension control pretty regularly. and it is always something that we all strive to work against. So yeah, so again, in summary, we have the major registers starting from the oh oh yeah, dude, thanks a lot, Jefferson. Yeah, no, it really it's when you compartmentalize how your voice works, it definitely makes it a lot easier, especially in the booth, because sometimes like for instance, in the Megatronic song "Line of Fire," that's actually the second version of it. The first version of it, I sung the hook in head voice, and while it was the safer decision, while it was easier to sing the Line of Fire hook, and yeah, Gary, same thing. So while it was safer to sing the hook in head voice, what I did, I just when I listened to it, I just didn't like it because it didn't seem like it didn't seem good to keep it in the front of the face because there are tones that show up when you're singing that way. So I went back and redid it at the studio, Tony Corelli's. Hey, Tony. And I did it in more of a chesty, robust tone. And while it is a bit more tiring to sing that way, in my opinion, it was stylistically the better choice. And you'll see this a lot, in my opinion, like with a lot of some of my favorite vocalists I work with, those decisions are made a lot. Where, sure, could you sing that chorus and head voice and do it comfortably? Yeah. But would it sound as desperate or whatever, I guess, tone you're trying to convey in the song? I don't know. This is where, like, in my opinion, a really good singer's ear comes into play. You have to make a lot of those judgment calls because you know your voice more than anybody else. And so a good singer is not just being able to hit the notes that are given to you. It's understand what part of your voice conveys the right emotion or what also just fits sonically. I mean, couldn't talk about what I recorded recently, but when it comes out, I can talk about what it was. Let's see. How do you sing the chest without running out of gas? Well, that's a complicated question, I guess, to answer, but it depends. With chest stuff, when it comes to endurance, a couple of things could be happening with the voice. The chest voice, a lot of vocalists fall into a trap where as they are ascending up to the Passaggio, they much like, again, gears of a car, you're going to be pushing your chest voice and pulling it as high as possible, and you can really only do that for so long. This is actually one of the reasons that I was critical of a lot of Adele performances. I don't say that her music's bad. I never have. But what I heard was there was a lot of pulling the chest voice up. And it worked great for it worked really great for what she's trying to convey, which is what I mentioned earlier about high chest voice can be a really beautiful sounding thing if really conveyed correctly, or just done at all. However, when you're dealing with that live, it's like you're running the engine out. Like the engine can only go so far, pushing that gear as hard as it can. So my recommendation, there's a couple things. I prefer in my Passaggio, especially live, I switch to head voice as early as I can because I know that it's less tension on the voice. Because the low, what's high for my chest voice is not high for my head voice. Number one. And number two, another reason a lot of people's chest voices burn out typically boils down to breath control. It seems like a very fundamental issue that a lot of people should have down. I actually didn't. When I was taking lessons, when I went to my second coach, Joy, if she's watching my way, hi Joy. She was amazing about helping my breathing out. Like at that point, I'd had 2 years of lessons before that. I had about a couple years of a cappella and choir. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, my breathing must be fine. After all that singing, it's fine. It was not. It was not at all. And at that point, I had been doing live shows with what they call power metal bands. And the main one I worked with, we got to play with Stradivarius, Pagan's Mind, Doral Pesh. I did a lot of singing. And the problem was I would always putter out. Like I'd get exhausted on song 3 or 4. And my chords would just be dry and irritated. And the main thing I had a problem with was breathing. I didn't know how to control my breath. And so I mentioned earlier, resonance was one of the 2 volume knobs of the voice. The other main volume knob is going to be your lower abdominals or your lungs. How do you control your air? And I try to avoid just saying the word diaphragm because I think that it's a little misleading when somebody obsesses about the diaphragm. The diaphragm is, yes, it's important to your breathing, but the diaphragm is best reviewed as kind of a reactionary muscle. When you breathe in, it's actually very hard to activate the diaphragm on just by itself. The diaphragm really works best when it's like when conditions are met. What that means is when you breathe the right amount of air into your lower abdominal area around those muscles, if you want to have like I guess we can refer to as an air elasticity, where you breathe in almost like an accordion. So this is your abdomen. It's like my stomach and it's my back. So it's like you see like this happen, like. Also, you're trying to breathe. You're not just breathing out in. You're also trying to squeeze from your sides a little bit and also pull back and up. So this is your stomach, and you want to like squeeze it up. And so when you're doing that, the diaphragm is not the only thing you're engaging. You want to think your lower core. If you can combine good resonance, tension control, register control with your breath, all of those things, when it comes to endurance, they work together as kind of like the pillars of a house. If all are strong, it's going to give you a lot more endurance. Now, another thing that could be happening too is we haven't talked a lot about vocal conditioning. For instance, I mentioned earlier that I had some reflux problems. I believe the reflux. I have a lot of mucus in my postnasal drip. I'm very dry. Could not be a lot of water as well. But that also can be a factor. A lot of people tend to neglect just how important conditioning is, especially for rock singing. And then there's a lot of things. Like, for instance, one of the things that I worked on for my endurance over the years was making sure that I could hear myself better. And so I invested in in-ear monitors. And now I don't perform without them. Because let's think about that. If we're singing in a loud venue with a full rock band behind us, blasting out sound, we're at the mercy of the monitors. And a lot of times those monitors are not going to be sufficient. So when you can't hear yourself, your voice is going to be pushed to its limit pretty quickly, and you'll find yourself exhausted after maybe 2-3 songs. So, oh, cool. Glad you checked it out, man. So, fun fact about tea. This is actually my favorite concoction for the voice, right here. This is a mixture of the 3 powders I talked about before. This is licorice root, slippery elm bark powder, and marshmallow root extract. Or not extract, but just marshmallow root powder. This is incredible. This has actually been kind of curing my reflux lately. It can really help the GI tract. It can also help with breaking up mucus. It can help with inflammation. It's really good. Hey, what's going on, Mike? How you doing, man? So we got some of the comments here. Let's go read a few of them. All right, I gotta be able to see. I guess I'm getting old. Let's see. All right. So, Jefferson says, damn, dude, you blew my mind. Did never realize there's a concept as head voice versus chest voice, and that makes total sense. Thanks, buddy. Gary, my buddy, he says head voice, you can falsetto, right? Read that earlier. How can I sing as great as Maynard? I'm going to do my best to not try to throw too much shade on other vocalists. There are a couple things that Maynard does well, and I'm not detracting anything from what he does as an artist. There are a few things that, I guess the best way to put it is he's good at what he writes, and it works great for what he's doing. I don't really necessarily see him being too effective on other stuff. I mean, we did see him do some Queen before, and I just don't know if it's for him. I think he's got a lot more range left unlocked, but at this point, it works for what he's doing. So that's best way you can put it. All right, so let's see. Chris Reiberg, I'd agree about the analogy of shifting gears. It's definitely hard to navigate the Passaggio for some people. I had a similar revelation with the shift feeling, which definitely helped me get more confident with it, but boys, it's still difficult for certain songs. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, buddy. Armand, sometimes when I push really hard while singing, a small fart slips out. Well, that sounds like a GI thing. It's, sometimes I guess that can happen. Jeff Tate was actually interviewed in a book I had years ago from Queensryche. They compared it to a bowel movement, because if you get the right abdominal muscles moving, kind of does feel like one. Let's see. Other big ones here. Jefferson, the post-nasal drip effing kills me, even just for speaking voice. Yeah, it's annoying. It's really annoying. Mike, thanks. Glad you like the background. So, yeah, conditioning. Good rule of thumb, especially the older we get. If you find yourself drinking because you're thirsty, if you're a vocalist, that means it's too late. You should have been drinking well before that. The vocal cords, those things I talked about. Again, you're looking down the throat. These are the cords. They're vibrating and releasing air. If they are dry, they are going to start becoming raw. They're going to start wearing out. They need a thin layer of hydration to protect themselves, to allow for their ability to move fluidly and also not get raw. So it is very, very important to make sure those are hydrated. I know water is kind of like a boring thing to recommend, but it is crucial. I haven't had a lot lately. Like, I've been very lazy myself. Mike, what do you take for allergies? So allergies are most singers, it's like the bane of their existence. I still have trouble with them sometimes. My big thing lately has been just eliminating the allergens of where I sleep. I do have other options. Do I have it with me right now? No, not with me. A nebulizer with saline is a really good idea. However, I will say that a nebulizer, if you switch the saline out with purified water, that helped me out a lot. It really just depends on the circumstances. Megatronics did a show in New York, and we also did a show in Pennsylvania 2 days before. And for those that have heard the music, it's not the easiest stuff in the world to sing. And I'm stubborn, and so I don't like down tuning or cutting corners. So I want to make sure I could nail everything, even if the weather was very inhospitable, and it was. We played a really great venue on the PA show, but I think the heating wasn't working, and it was one of the coldest days of the year. It was miserable. It was one of the first few times on stage I couldn't feel my feet, and so we're on stage, and we have a great crowd too. And in the back of my mind, I'm kind of thinking, man, you guys are troopers, because if I wasn't singing tonight, probably wouldn't be here right now. This is cold. This is really cold. So I had to make sure that I overhydrated, like more than I possibly wanted. And then when we did New York 2 days afterwards, we're going north. It's getting even colder. So I used the nebulizer with just water, and I just breathed it in constantly. So this might actually help with allergens as well. Again, it depends on the symptoms. It depends on the symptoms that you're going to get from your allergens. But keeping the vocal cords as moist and lubricated as possible is really important. Not only that, but if you keep yourself overhydrated, the thick mucus will be building up. Excuse me, the thick mucus should be building up. The more water you have, because mucus is mostly water, it'll begin to make the mucus thinner. Like that, you really want that nice, like thin, runny mucus, the clear mucus. If you want anything to really cover the cords, you want that or just any kind of hydration. And so a lot of issues tend to involve thick mucus, and that's one of the number one issues a vocalist is going to have. Is going to be thick mucus. So that's one. Another thing too is if you want to get natural, there are some natural ways to fight allergens. One of them is going to be a compound you can find inside of pineapple. This compound is called bromelain. Now you could just eat a bunch of pineapple, but there are ways to actually supplement bromelain. I actually have in my cabinet. I have some. I have that mixed with quercetin. Quercetin is something found in a lot of cruciferous vegetables. Get it? Quercetin, cruciferous. I wonder if they're related. But the combination of both is almost kind of like a natural antihistamine. The main reason I try to avoid too many over-the-counter drugs is they most come with a price. Now, the price that I'm talking about is not really the worst, but with singing, a little bit goes a long way. As someone like Mike might notice here, Mike's a regularly performing vocalist. He works very hard. He's on his voice all the time. So I'm pretty confident that if he were to have some allergens, this guy's going to notice. These cover gigs they're not friendly. You've got to sing for a long time. So some people might have to take something. I know Singulair is a commonly prescribed medication that singers have some success with. I was on Singulair for a little bit. It gave me some weight gain. It also messes up with your mood a lot. So I did not have a great time on Singulair, but a lot of doctors will recommend that. Sometimes they'll also recommend. I do have turmeric. Turmeric's good stuff. I have not tried the other thing you recommended, Tassel, but thank you. I might give it a crack. But yeah, so the other one that I've noticed is something called budesonide. Budesonide is also really commonly recommended. I believe that's a steroid. I didn't have the best success with it. Again, I try to avoid anything I don't need. They have a price. Like the price I paid for it back during Space Kumite was in order to get better and get over the allergy that I found. And for those who don't know, during that show, I found out that I had I found after the show that I developed a new allergy to salmon. Well, I've been eating salmon every single day, and so I had this gunk everywhere in my throat, and I had to fight it. And so I was on budesonide, I was on Singulair, and all this stuff, and it just wasn't getting the job done. So yeah, there was a price to be paid for that. Afterwards, I just stopped eating salmon, and I felt a lot better. But those drugs, oh my God, I was so burned out. I was so exhausted. I felt like I was gonna pass out after gigs. Like I'd be in the dressing room, and I would like just be like a shell. Like I'd be so tired. There's always a price to be paid with a lot of these medications. But some people do well. I know that of all the over-the-counter antihistamines, Zyrtec seems all right. I have not noticed any bad side effects of Zyrtec. Also, some singers have cited that Flonase works quite well. So those are not bad. Unfortunately, there's not like a number one, cure-all for those kind of things. But yeah, so let's so we talked a little bit about range, how we build it. Vocal lessons are immensely important because one of the things I've picked up as a vocal coach, and again, I had this issue, was a lot of people will be singing in falsetto, but they are confident that they're in head voice. Like they are certain they're in head voice. And a lot of times they're just modifying their falsetto, and they think it's different. But one way to find out is you can actually feel the air leaking out, because when you're compressed, you're not really leaking a lot of air out because the chords are they're together and vibrating. So for instance, if you hit like a high note and you do something like like I feel a little bit of air coming through because I'm decompressed there. But if I did the same exact note in my head voice, yeah, like not really, because you're compressed and you're releasing just the right amount of air out and you're aiming it. So that's one of my big jobs as a vocal coach. If I'll hear someone coming going, all right, I think this is my head voice, and I'll hear it and I'll be like, bad news. Well, the good news is you have much more range than you think you have left, but that's not head voice. And that was where I was with my first coach, a guy named Larry. When I was learning from him, I thought I had it down. I thought I had it down, and not really. Hey, what's going on, Mike? All right, I got an update for the thing you said earlier. So yeah, that can really be tricky, because I've even had some shows over the years where I'll be working with some other artists, and I'll do a technique called a siren. Now, a siren is one of the more advanced techniques that I know. It's basically where you take a low chest note, and then you slide up into your top head voice. So something like this. Let's try to see if I can get it today. So it's like, so what I'm doing on that one, what's important with that is as you go up your register or registers, once you hit the passaggio, the point of this trick is to make the transition from your chest all the way to your head voice completely seamless. Like you want to just gently slide up your range. And as I would do that technique, I'd see a lot of people like backstage, they desperately try to just pull it off in front of me. Like just desperately pull it off. And they're all good. A lot of them are good people I've worked with. But in back of my mind, I'm kind of like, man, you're not going to get it that fast. You need someone to like coach you through that. Like, I studied back when I was taking my first 2 years of lessons. I got the Jim Gillette Metal Method DVD. I was like watching that. It's this cheesy instructional DVD. Like how to sing heavy metal high notes, and I had a book I was reading a lot called The Secrets of Heavy Rock Singing. I was really studying, and I'd spend time in my parents' house when I was a kid. Like I would just practicing how to get that slide just right, where to put the voice, what it should feel like all those sensations. And then after enough hard work, I was able to unlock a lot of that. So a lot of these ways, the best way to describe these techniques is you're kind of tricking your voice into doing more than you thought it could. And the resonance really sets that up. Like, for instance, when I did that slide you saw, there's stages to it. Like, for instance, the beginning of it, I felt the E in the teeth. Like, and almost like you're sort of throwing up a little bit. Not from the throat, but like your mouth. When you get to the Y, like the E, like here, where it's like, like that. It's a very gradual motion. You're just putting the minimum amount of effort into your mouth as you're ascending up, going to the and at that point, you also see another trick I'm doing. I'm keeping my tongue relaxed. I'm keeping it inactive, and the reason why is it number one can help with your neck tension. It's all of it's connected, and also makes a little extra room when you make it inactive. You're not forcing it down, but you're just like that. And it's hard because when you think projection, you think tension, and so you want to tense the tongue up. You want to tense the neck up, and even now, like you'll still see like some lines and stuff in my very high notes because everything's just as open as it can be as I'm going up. All of those mechanisms are working at once. They're all working, and eventually, when you get that top note, like right there, that's where I felt it, and that's a lot of the principles behind how this stuff works. So I guess for the remainder of this episode I have, if you guys have any other questions, I'd love to talk about it. It's just a reminder, I do teach vocal lessons on Skype. I used to teach some in-person lessons, but to be honest, most of it was Skype. It's a really easy medium to teach on. I've been doing it for years. I have a lot of fun doing it, and it's quite effective. So if you are interested, you can take a look at my website, robbradley.net. You go there and go to the school I work out of, and you can schedule a trial lesson there, AmericanMusicStudio.net. But hey, what's going on, Laura? Nice to see you. But yeah, so building range. It's I would say like I spent most likely the first 2 years of lessons, specifically on that principle, like how we build the voice, like how do you get more out of your voice, and then once you start doing that. Then it starts boiling it down to maintenance. Again, I think that when I was studying initially with the building the high range and stuff, I should have probably learned how to breathe first. It's like I was taught how to sprint, but I didn't really know how to walk yet. So there's a whole other episode I can do about how the lower abdominals work. There actually are a few spots in your abdomen you don't want to squeeze from. They can put a lot of tension onto your abdominals and make it hard to kind of get that pull back feeling I mentioned earlier. So again, this is your back, this is your front, this is your stomach. You really want you're squeezing in and up. So this is me squeezing from the sides, in and up. There are a few muscles that if they are activated and tensed, it'll make that motion a bit harder. So just something to keep in mind. But I think that might wrap up all I wanted to talk about in today's lesson. Or at least today's episode. So if you guys have any other questions, feel free to hit me up. Hope you found this educational, informative. Otherwise, enjoy your quarantine, everybody. I might be back tonight for a little bit of Doom Eternal. I do got to finish that game. Otherwise, I will see you guys later. And have a good day. Or